Students, we can see today about speciation. So, last two classes we have discussed about micro as well as macro evolution. So, macro evolutions may lead to some of the micro and macro evolution uh, flows may factors may lead to speciation. So, what is speciation? It's a process of formation of new genetically independent group of organism called a species through the course of evolution. So, formation of new species as we have seen in gradualism and punctuated evolution. So, formation of kind of new species which is called as a speciation. Speciation may occur in two forms or two ways. One is transformation of old species into new species over time, and splitting up of single species into several. That is the multiplication of the species. That is a cause of speciation occur in two ways. So these two ways always represent anagenesis and cladogenesis. Of course, there is a as a result of anagenesis and cladogenesis, there will be a formation of new species. So, what may be the causes of speciation occur as the result of several factors, which are some of the factors like natural selection we have seen, genetic drift we have seen, migration, mutation, and gene flow. Of course, gene flow, reduced gene flow within a kind of set of population. Within a set of population, there is a kind of movement, migration, which is a reduced gene flow. So that is some of the causes of the speciation. And how does speciation occurs? So classically, speciation has been observed as a three-stage process. One is speciation occurs when the population is isolated from a large population to a smaller population, and divergence in the trait of separated population, that is a mating system or habitat. Based on the habitat, there may be a divergence or the mating system, like reproductive isolation, or as geographical isolation. There is a divergence in trait of separated population. So reproductive isolation of a population, that maintain isolation when population come into contact, that is also a form. So three forms: one is by geographical isolation, reproductive isolation, and classically speciation has been observed in a from a large set of population, a small set is isolated. So from that, the speciation may occur. And type of speciation and mode of speciation, many things are there. Speciation, nothing but as I said that it's nothing but a formation of a new species, and their causes and processes we have seen. And the type of species types are like allopatric speciation, peripatric speciation, parapatric speciation, and sympathetic speciation. In the diagram itself, it is very clear that original population, from the original population, the barrier formation is seen in each and every kind of speciation. So in the initial step of speciation, in all type there is a variation. In initial step of speciation, we can see all changes are there. And evolution of reproductive isolation also. So reproductive isolation also, there is a great changes is seen. So lastly, new distinct species after a stage of equilibrium of new ranges, there comes a similar results. There comes a results, similar results. Then original population will develop. Then initial step of speciation may occur. Okay, like this only the steps are there. To understand these steps, it's very easy by the diagrammatic representation. It is very easy to understand the step from the original population, how the initial step of speciation is seen in the allopatric, in peripatric, in parapatric, and sympatric. They are very very much different. And to say in detail, to see in somewhat representative form, allopatric is a geographical barrier. We can see geographical barrier. By the geographical barrier, these kind of allopatric systems are happening. In the sympatric, due to kind of genetic polymorphism, also within a group of populations, or a kind of changes whatever happening, or a selective mating in the sympatric is happening. In the parapatric, it is a partial kind of spatial isolation similar to the allopatric, but a partial spatial isolations are seen. Mm, and in peripatric, here isolation of population at the periphery, isolation of the population at the edge, or ecological edge, we can say at as a edge effect. In the peripatric, isolation of a population at the edge, or the rim, or the periphery, it is said like that. Okay, so allopatric, wherever we are seeing the allopatric speciation, it can be simply said that how it is differentiated, or how it is modified into one form to another forms. So first we can see what is allopatric speciation. So, allopatric speciation, it is a most common type of speciation. Okay, very well known and the most common type of speciation, which is taking place in the effect of the different kind of natural selection, genetic drift, of course. So, most common type of speciation, which involve separations of species into two groups. So mostly due to geographical kind of separation, this may occur due to climatic changes, movement of tectonic plates leading to fragmentation of mass of land. Of course, in the forest area we can see there is a fragmentations are happening in between some kind of ridges of masses of sea water bodies are going, or eruption of kind of land masses, or kind of formation of waterway, or due to the presence of impassable mountain ranges, all together. Any kind of changes whichever happening in the geographical entities is called as a allopatric speciation. So many examples are there in allopatric speciation. One such kind is Arizona's Grand Canyon formed when kind of geographical localities. There we are seeing the squirrel species and other small mammals that has once been the part of a single population, could not longer contact and reproduce with each other across their new geographical barrier, because of the separation of the geographical barrier, no kind of mating process and reproduction process was happening during that time. So they could no longer interbreed also. So the squirrel population underwent some kind of speciation, and two separate squirrel species which is inhabiting the north and south rim of the canyon. It is a very well good known example. So two species of squirrel have been attained at the end of the allopatric speciation. But in the cases of birds, whichever and other species which can migrate, or the gene flow, wherever the gene flow is possible, the barrier continued to be interbreed and were not divided into separate population. Those population where seems to be a kind of known population, no kind of new species has been arrived, and this is very well represented by the migration or gene flow. So if the migration is possible, the same kind of population is seen. This is the good example of allopatric speciation, and many more kind of examples are there in the allopatric speciation. And some of the example, like what we can say, um, Darwin finches. Of course, Darwin finches, the classical example of allopatric speciation is another example is Darwin finches, based on their second kind of causes, divergent population of the finches inhabiting the Galapagos Island is always seen. So it were observed to have different differences in features, such as the change in the body size, color, and beak length, or shape. The difference resulted because of the different type of food available in the various kind of island. That is also a kind of a good example of the allopatric speciation, where we are learning about the Darwin finches. And squirrel is of course a good example. And second thing is a kind of example which we can, by which we can explain this kind of speciation, is peripatric speciation. So what is happening in the peripatric speciation? So when small group of individual break off from a large group and form a new species. Simple thing. When small group of individual break off from a large group and form a new species, this is called peripatric speciation. As in allopatric speciation, physical barrier make it impossible for member of the group to interpret with one another. Similar to the allopatric speciation, we can say similar to the allopatric speciation, but small group may break. Small group, not a great kind of large population, may divide into two geographical barrier. A small group of individual break off from a large group due to different kind of means not only to by kind of physical factors or environmental factors, by other source also they may try to separate and form a new kind of new species. The Australian birds is a very good example. And mosquitoes, London underground mosquitoes, a variant of mosquitoes which entered into the London underground in 19th century, are the example of peripatric speciation. Okay, small kind of changes has been seen now. Here the kind of gene flow is there, possibly a small kind of gene flow is there, and kind of variant is also is later attained in the peripatric speciation. Not great examples are there. The Australian bird Petrosia multicolor, and London underground mosquito, a variant of a Culex pipens, which entered into the London underground in the 19th century, or the example of some kind of peripatric speciation. Here you can see London underground. We are seeing some kind of small patches. As we can say, in a big geographical area, we can take a small patches. In a big geographical area, say it is as a cave. In a big geographical area, cave is one of the habitats. So change in habitat also make them to change into a new species. So this is a peripatric speciation. And when it comes to parapatric speciation, in parapatric speciation, the a species is spread out over a large geographical area. A species is spread out over a large geographical area. Although it is possible for any member of the species to mate with another member, individual only mate with those in their own geographical area. That is the very near, means like a neighbor. They will mate only the neighbor. Even though it is a big geographical area, they may mate with the only neighbors, or a very close proximity, only with a very close proximity. We can easily say in some of the places itself, some of the places where people are getting married in one kind of forest area. We can see some in the case of Cholanayakar and all. They will marry only in their locality, even though they are tribal form of peoples. They will go with their own racial own very neighbor people only. So many such examples are there. Okay. So the grass species, where some species living near the mine have become tolerant to heavy metals. However, other plants that don't live around the mines are not tolerant. But because the plants are close together, they could fertilize each other and result in a new species. Even though they are tolerant and not tolerant group of species, when they are living in the close together, they could fertilize each other and resulting in a new species. That is a parapatric speciation. In a big kind of geographical area, in a big kind of geographical area, yeah, within a small population, the changes are happening. So it is like a Venn diagram. In the Venn diagram, a possible kind of kind of partial spatial isolation, which is called as a, it's a similar to the geographical barrier, but it is a partial spatial isolation. The parapatric diagram itself, we can see partial spatial isolation, where two diagrams are very much close. The two kind of population are very much in a close proximity. So that is a great example of parapatric speciation. And lastly, sympathetic speciation. And sympathetic speciation is always under the confusion, is always remaining in a great confusion. The sympathetic speciation um, is a controversial thing. Some scientists don't believe it exists. Some people think it is whether it is there or not. Sympathetic speciation occur when there are no physical barrier preventing any member of a species from mating with another, and all members are in close proximity to one another. That is a sympathetic speciation. It occurs when there is no any kind of physical barrier preventing any member of the species from mating with one another, and they are remaining in a close proximity to one another. A new species perhaps is based on different food source or characteristics, seems to develop spontaneously. So a new species perhaps based on the different food source or a different kind of character seems to develop spontaneously in the in this kind of speciation. The theory is that some individual become dependent on certain aspect of the environment, such as food source, shelter, while other do not. So that is the theory behind this sympathetic speciation. Is that the theory is that some individual become dependent on certain aspect of the environment, like food source is one of the aspect. The possible examples of sympathetic speciation is a very good example is a apple maggot. Apple maggot is a very good example. An insect that lay its egg inside the fruit of apple, causing it to rot. As the apple falls from the tree, the maggot dig in the ground before emerging as flies several months later. So the apple maggot originally laid its egg in the fruit of a relative of apple, a fruit called hawthorn, hawthorns, hawthorns kind of fruit, where the egg is laid. After apple were introduced to North America in the 19th century, a type of maggot developed that only lay its eggs in apple. Okay, so firstly, similar to the apple, the egg was laid in a fruit called hawthorns, and after that, when the apple was introduced later in the North America in the 19th century, the flies were start laying egg in the apple. The original hawthorn species still lays its egg in the hawthorns, and the two species of maggots are not different species yet, but many scientists believe that they are undergoing a process of sympathetic speciation. They are thinking that it is a sympathetic speciation. Of course, there is a great kind of debate over there about the sympathetic speciation. So, sympathetic speciation is observed in the apple maggot, and which 200 years ago laid eggs and breed only on the hawthorns, but now lay eggs on the both hawthorns and domestic apple. So some people, some scientists thinks like that it is laying egg on both of them, and both are different species. As the result, gene flow between part of the population that mate on different type of fruit is reduced, and in fewer than 200 years some genetic difference between these two group of flies have been evolved. So some scientists think that eggs were laid in two different kind of fruits, and later some variation has been seen that may be raised to a kind of different kind of species. It was observed like that. Okay, so sympathetic speciation is nothing but process of formation of new species from a original population that are not geographically isolated. It is based on the establishment of new population of a species in different ecological niches and the reproductive isolation and the based on the reproductive isolation. Here, the gene flow between daughter and parental population is inhibited by some kind of internal factors such as chromosomal changes and non-random mating. Genetic differences seen within intrinsic or internal factors. Within the internal kind of geographical kind of thing, changes are appearing such as chromosomal changes and non-random mating. That is nothing but called as a sympathetic speciation. So of course, this speciation having many kind of things what we can say, many kind of examples. So speciation, when it as a conclusion, so recent research shows that step 1 and 2 may take place simultaneously in the same places, and often the third step does not occur. That means isolation and divergence may take place simultaneously. The process of speciation begin with the isolation of subpopulation of the species, which could either occur through physical isolation, that is allopatric speciation, or genetic isolation. We can simply say as physical isolation, allopatric speciation, or a genetic isolation called as sympathetic speciation. So once the population is separated, a gradual accumulation of small genetic changes resulted in subpopulation of these species that eventually make them a different species. That is the conclusion of the speciation. Okay. So over time, the subpopulation become gradually independent and will continue to diverge by mutation, selection, and genetic drift, or any other kind of causes of sympathetic speciation. Like that, evolution may take place. Eventually, the evolution may take place in a life cycle pathway, like that. Okay. So I think you have understand the kind of speciation, where it is easily explainable with this easily it can be understand with this kind of diagram, where original population remains the same and the new distinct population also remain the same. In between initial and evolution reproductive isolation, the changes are taking place. Okay. I think you have understand all these things. So with that, I'm finishing this speciation. Thank you.